The observation deck of the interstellar vessel hummed with a subdued anticipation that belied the magnitude of the moment. Captain Zara of the Galactic Consensus leaned forward, her iridescent skin shifting colors with subtle emotional fluctuations, a biological response that typically signaled intense concentration or barely contained excitement. Earth hung before them, a blue-green marble suspended in the vast darkness of space. Countless sensor arrays probed the planet's surface, collecting data that would determine humanity's initial classification within the galactic community. The preliminary scans had been frustratingly inconclusive, a rarity for a species as technologically advanced as the Consensus. "Sensor sweep complete," announced First Analyst Krell, his translucent tendrils manipulating holographic displays with practiced ease. Technological development: minimal. Global communication networks: fragmented. Space exploration: rudimentary at best. Captain Zara's secondary optical sensors narrowed, processing the information. Her species had encountered hundreds of developing civilizations, and humans appeared to follow a disappointingly familiar pattern. Young species typically passed through predictable stages: technological infancy, global conflict, potential self-destruction, and then either extinction or careful guidance from more advanced civilizations. But something felt different about Earth. The planet's data streams told a complex story that defied simple categorization. Despite seemingly limited technological capabilities, human communication networks displayed an unprecedented level of complexity. Information traveled at speeds and through patterns that seemed to defy the Consensus's standard predictive models. Global conflicts existed, yet the species maintained a remarkable ability to simultaneously create breathtaking scientific advancements, artistic expressions, and intricate social systems. "Analyze the communication patterns again," Zara instructed Krell. "There's something unusual in their data transmission." The holographic displays shifted, revealing intricate webs of digital communication that sprawled across the planet. Unlike other developing species that maintained rigid, hierarchical information networks, human communication resembled a living, breathing organism. Ideas spread like quantum entanglement, unpredictable, instantaneous, resistant to traditional methods of control or suppression. Krell's analysis revealed something even more intriguing. Despite apparent technological limitations, humans demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for rapid adaptation. Their scientific and technological progress seemed to accelerate exponentially when faced with challenges: climate change research, medical breakthroughs, computational innovations. Each crisis became an opportunity for unprecedented leaps in understanding. Their artificial intelligence research is particularly fascinating, Krell noted, projecting additional data streams. They're developing machine learning algorithms that approach sentience through fundamentally different methodologies than our established protocols. Captain Zara's skin rippled with a complex pattern of blue and silver, her species equivalent of deep contemplation. The standard Consensus approach would be to classify Earth as a Category 3 developing civilization. Essentially, a species to be carefully managed, potentially guided, and monitored to prevent self-destruction. But the data suggested something different. The planet's geographical and cultural diversity presented a level of complexity that defied simple categorization. Humans had developed multiple sophisticated cultural systems, each with unique approaches to problem-solving, governance, and technological innovation. Their ability to generate diverse solutions to identical challenges was statistically improbable by conventional galactic standards. "Prepare initial contact protocols," Zara commanded, "but implement maximum caution directive. Something about this species feels unpredictable." Little did the Consensus know that unpredictability was precisely humanity's greatest strength. As the massive starship maintained its silent vigil above Earth, the planet continued its endless dance of creation and destruction, progress and setback, completely unaware of the extraordinary attention it had attracted from beyond the stars. First contact was imminent, and nothing would ever be the same. The United Nations headquarters in New York had never seen anything like this. Beneath the ornate ceiling and between marble columns that had witnessed countless international negotiations, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Diplomatic representatives from every major nation stood shoulder to shoulder, a rare display of global unity that spoke volumes about the significance of the moment. Marine Sergeant Elena Rodriguez remained positioned at the back of the human delegation, her posture both relaxed and alert. Years of strategic training had honed her ability to read people, or in this case, beings, with remarkable precision. The alien delegation materialized through a shimmering technological portal that defied everything humans understood about transportation. Captain Zora led the consensus delegation, her iridescent form shifting with colors that suggested a complex emotional landscape. Behind her, a group of alien diplomats moved with a choreographed precision that felt both impressive and slightly artificial. Their communication devices hummed softly, automatic translation systems working overtime to bridge the vast linguistic and cultural divide. The first words from the alien delegation dripped with patronizing condescension. "Greetings, emerging species," Captain Zora began, her translator rendering the words in perfect clinical English. "The Galactic Consensus recognizes your potential for future development. We are prepared to offer guidance and protection as you navigate the complexities of interstellar existence." Rodriguez watched the reaction of the human diplomats. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others maintained carefully neutral expressions. But beneath the surface, a current of something unexpected was building. A collective resistance to being treated like children. The alien holographic displays began to activate, showing simplified representations of galactic history. Each image was carefully curated to demonstrate the consensus's benevolent approach to developing civilizations. Star systems transformed, primitive technologies elevated, entire species guided towards what the aliens considered progression. What the aliens didn't realize was that humans had their own deeply complex understanding of guidance, protection, and cultural development. Dr. Marcus Chen, the lead scientific advisor, leaned forward slightly. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "We appreciate your interest in our civilization. Could you elaborate on the specific nature of this guidance you're proposing?" The question was deceptively simple. Rodriguez recognized it immediately as a strategic probe designed to reveal the aliens' true intentions. Captain Zara's color shifted, a subtle change that might have gone unnoticed by less observant individuals. The consensus has successfully integrated numerous developing civilizations into our collaborative framework. We provide technological advancements, cultural optimization protocols, and protection from external threats. The word optimization hung in the air, laden with unspoken implications. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. Cultural optimization, protection. These were words she had heard before, in briefings about historical human interventions in less developed regions. Words that often masked something far more complex and potentially destructive. The alien displays continued, showing sanitized representations of planetary transformations. Landscapes reshaped, technologies introduced, cultures subtly, or not so subtly, altered to fit a predetermined galactic template. What the consensus didn't understand was the fundamental human capacity for resistance, for maintaining cultural identity in the face of overwhelming external pressure. Dr. Chen's diplomatic smile never wavered. And what happens to civilizations that do not wish to be optimized? A momentary silence filled the chamber. The alien diplomats exchanged glances, their communication so swift it was almost imperceptible. "Resistance is inefficient," Captain Zara responded. "The consensus ensures the most beneficial outcome for all participating species." Rodriguez studied the alien delegation. Their body language suggested absolute certainty, a complete belief in their own superiority. They saw humans as a project to be managed, a civilization to be shaped and molded according to predetermined galactic standards. They could not have been more wrong. Beneath the polished diplomatic exterior, humanity was preparing its response, not with weapons or technology, but with something far more powerful, a complex understanding of independence, cultural diversity, and the intrinsic value of self-determination. The diplomatic meeting was just beginning, and the galactic consensus was about to learn that humanity was nothing like they expected. The diplomatic reception continued in a lavish hall within the United Nations complex. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over a carefully arranged buffet that represented cuisines from around the world, a subtle demonstration of human cultural diversity. Servers moved between groups, offering delicacies that challenged the aliens' understanding of biological sustenance. Senior diplomat Vex, a tertiary representative of the galactic consensus, stood near a large window overlooking the New York skyline. His biological translator hummed softly, converting his native communication into carefully modulated human speech. To the casual observer, he appeared engaged in polite conversation. To Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, watching from across the room, he represented something far more complex. Our records indicate numerous conflicts in human history, Vex was saying to a group of international representatives. Fascinating how a species can progress despite such persistent internal struggles. Dr. Marcus Chen listened carefully, his diplomatic smile never wavering. Vex continued, growing more comfortable with his narrative. The consensus has developed significantly more efficient methods of managing planetary development. When we encounter civilizations with persistent conflict, we implement comprehensive resolution strategies. The phrase comprehensive resolution strategies caught Rodriguez's attention. Her years of military experience had taught her to listen for the spaces between words, to hear what was left unsaid. A junior diplomat from the consensus delegation stepped forward, seemingly eager to elaborate. Our most successful interventions involve complete societal recalibration. When a species demonstrates repeated patterns of conflict, we implement systemic changes. Sometimes this requires significant population adjustments. The room grew subtly quieter. Rodriguez saw the moment the diplomat realized he had said too much. Population adjustments. Dr. Chen's voice was mild, almost conversational. The alien diplomat's translator flickered momentarily, a rare technical glitch that suggested internal nervousness. We ensure minimal disruption. Civilizations are guided toward optimal developmental paths. Conflicts are eliminated by removing fundamental sources of disagreement. Rodriguez moved closer, her movement casual but purposeful. Years of intelligence training had honed her ability to read subtext, to understand the implications hidden beneath diplomatic language. Vex seemed to sense the shift in the room's atmosphere. He attempted to soften his previous statement. You must understand, our interventions are designed to prevent suffering. Conflict resolution at a planetary scale requires comprehensive approaches. Dr. Chen's response was measured. And these comprehensive approaches include eliminating entire populations. A moment of absolute silence followed. The alien diplomats exchanged rapid communication through barely perceptible color shifts and minute body movements. They had not expected such a direct challenge. Their historical interactions with developing civilizations had rarely involved such pointed questioning. Sergeant Rodriguez watched the interaction with a carefully controlled expression. She recognized the moment of vulnerability, the point where an overconfident entity reveals more than intended. Vex attempted to recover. Our methods ensure the greatest possible survival and advancement for species with significant developmental challenges. Some populations must be adjusted to prevent larger systemic failures. The human representatives exchanged glances, not of shock or horror, but of a deeper, more calculated understanding. Adjusted, Dr. Chen repeated. The word hung in the air, devoid of emotion, but laden with implication. Rodriguez knew what the aliens did not yet understand. Humanity's greatest strength was not in its technology or its military might. It was in its ability to listen, to analyze, and to respond with a complexity that defied simple categorization. The diplomatic reception continued, but something fundamental had changed. The galactic consensus had just revealed a truth they did not intend, a glimpse into a method of conflict resolution that was anything but civilized. And humanity was listening, carefully, precisely, preparing a response that would challenge everything the consensus believed about developing civilizations. The critical moment had arrived, and nothing would remain the same. The private conference room buzzed with a tension that transcended typical diplomatic interactions. Sergeant Elena Rodriguez sat at the center of the table, her military bearing carefully modulated to appear relaxed yet intensely focused. Around her, the senior leadership of the Galactic Consensus assembled, their bioluminescent forms shifting with anticipation and barely concealed condescension. Captain Zora positioned herself directly across from Rodriguez, her translucent skin rippling with colors that suggested a complex mix of curiosity and uncertainty. The room's advanced communication systems hummed softly, translation algorithms working overtime to capture the nuanced exchange. "We have requested this private session," Zora began, "to better understand human perspectives on conflict resolution." Rodriguez's smile was neither welcoming nor confrontational, a calculated expression that suggested deep reservoirs of knowledge carefully contained. "Conflict resolution is far more complex than most civilizations understand," she responded, her voice steady and measured. She activated a holographic display, revealing a comprehensive timeline that stretched across human history. The projection was not a simple linear narrative, but a complex web of interactions, conflicts, resolutions, and transformative moments. Each thread represented multiple perspectives: diplomatic, military, cultural, and humanitarian. Most species view conflict as a binary interaction, Rodriguez explained: victory or defeat, elimination or submission. Humans understand conflict as a multidimensional challenge of communication, understanding, and collective problem-solving. The alien diplomats leaned forward, their initial dismissiveness replaced by genuine intrigue. Rodriguez began to deconstruct human conflict resolution strategies. She presented case studies that defied the consensus's standard intervention models. The Marshall Plan after World War II, the peaceful transitions in South Africa, complex United Nations peacekeeping missions. Each example demonstrated how humanity approached conflict not as a problem to be eliminated, but as a challenge to be understood and transformed. "Our approach," she continued, "recognizes that conflict emerges from complex social, economic, and psychological dynamics. Elimination is never a solution. Understanding is the first step." Senior diplomat Vex interrupted, his translator rendering his words with a hint of challenge. "Your own history is filled with devastating conflicts. How can you speak of understanding?" Rodriguez's response was immediate and precise. "Precisely because of our history. Each conflict has taught us more about the complexity of human interaction. We do not glorify our mistakes. We study them. We learn from them." The holographic display shifted, showing intricate models of conflict resolution, statistical analyses, psychological frameworks, diplomatic strategies, each layer revealing the depth of approach that the consensus had never encountered. She demonstrated how human conflict resolution incorporated multiple disciplines: anthropology, psychology, economic analysis, cultural studies, military strategy, humanitarian considerations. Each conflict was not a simple mathematical problem to be solved, but a complex ecosystem of human experiences. "Your method of population adjustment," Rodriguez said, her voice clinical and calm, "is a failure of imagination. It represents a fundamental misunderstanding of adaptive systems." The room fell silent. The alien diplomats exchanged rapid communication through nearly imperceptible color shifts and minute movements. They had expected a military presentation. Instead, they received a comprehensive deconstruction of conflict resolution that challenged their most fundamental beliefs. Rodriguez continued, presenting historical examples where seemingly intractable conflicts were resolved through dialogue, economic cooperation, cultural exchange, and genuine attempts at mutual understanding. Each case study revealed a sophistication that went beyond simple technological solutions. "Conflict is not a problem to be eliminated," she repeated. "It is a communication challenge to be navigated." Captain Zora's skin shifted to a deep, contemplative blue. The presentation had transformed the room from a diplomatic meeting to an intense intellectual exchange. Rodriguez was not just presenting information. She was revealing an entire philosophical approach to human existence. The Galactic Consensus had come expecting to manage a developing civilization. Instead, they were encountering a species that viewed conflict, growth, and understanding as a complex, interconnected journey. And they were completely unprepared for what would come next. The presentation room transformed into an intellectual battleground. Holographic displays surrounded Rodriguez, each projection a carefully crafted window into the complexities of human moral reasoning. The Galactic Consensus delegation sat transfixed, their bioluminescent forms flickering with confusion and growing unease. Ethical boundaries are not simple lines, Rodriguez began, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of human philosophical struggle. They are living, breathing frameworks that evolve with our understanding of sentience, suffering, and collective responsibility. The first hologram materialized, a comprehensive timeline of human rights development. It was not a linear progression, but a complex network of interactions, conflicts, revelations, and continuous refinement. The aliens watched as the display showed moments of profound moral failure alongside equally profound moral awakening. Rodriguez zoomed in on specific historical moments: the abolition of slavery, the development of international humanitarian laws, the creation of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Each moment represented not just a political decision, but a fundamental revaluation of what it means to recognize the inherent dignity of sentient beings. Your concept of conflict resolution, she explained, is fundamentally a mathematical equation. Ours is a continuous dialogue with our own moral limitations. Senior diplomat Vex attempted to interject. Mathematical approaches ensure efficiency. Emotional considerations complicate resolution. Rodriguez's response was immediate. Emotions are not complications. They are the most sophisticated data processing systems in existence. The holographic display shifted, revealing complex neural network simulations that demonstrated the intricate ways human emotional intelligence process moral dilemmas. It was a visualization that defied the consensus understanding of decision-making. She presented case studies that challenged everything the aliens believed about conflict management. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, the Geneva Conventions, international criminal tribunals. Each example demonstrated a nuanced approach to justice that went far beyond simple elimination or control. When we speak of ethical boundaries, Rodriguez continued, we are not talking about rules. We are talking about a continuous process of collective moral reasoning. The alien diplomats exchanged rapid communication. Their translation systems struggled to capture the depth of her presentation. Concepts like collective moral reasoning existed nowhere in their computational frameworks. Rodriguez introduced the concept of proportionality in conflict resolution. She demonstrated how human legal systems developed increasingly sophisticated methods of understanding context, intent, and collective responsibility. The aliens watched as she broke down complex international legal frameworks that considered not just actions, but the intricate web of circumstances surrounding those actions. Your method of population management, she said, her voice clinical and precise, is a failure of moral imagination. It represents a fundamental inability to recognize the value of individual and collective complexity. The room fell into a profound silence. Captain Zora's bioluminescent form shifted to a color the translation systems could not adequately describe, a shade that suggested deep intellectual vulnerability. The consensus had encountered many developing civilizations, but never one that so thoroughly challenged their most fundamental assumptions about governance and ethical management. Rodriguez was not just presenting information. She was revealing an entire philosophical approach to existence that transformed conflict from a problem to be solved into a challenge to be understood. The holographic displays continued to shift, revealing layer after layer of human moral reasoning. Each projection challenged the consensus understanding of civilization, showing a species that did not seek to eliminate complexity, but to understand it. Ethical boundaries, Rodriguez concluded, are not walls. They are bridges of understanding. The alien delegation sat in stunned silence. They had arrived expecting to manage a developing civilization. Instead, they were confronting a species with a depth of moral reasoning they had never imagined possible. And this was only the beginning. The conference room transformed into an arena of intellectual combat. Sergeant Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, her posture a perfect blend of military discipline and academic precision. The Galactic Consensus delegation found themselves in uncharted territory, a situation that defied their centuries of interstellar diplomatic experience. "I propose a challenge," Rodriguez announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a well-honed blade. "A comprehensive review of the Consensus's historical intervention strategies." Captain Zora's bioluminescent form flickered, a reaction that translated to absolute surprise in her species' communication language. The challenge was unprecedented. No developing civilization had ever dared to demand such a comprehensive examination of the Consensus's actions. Rodriguez activated a holographic display that began to populate with intricate data streams, star systems, planetary records, intervention histories, each projection revealing layers of information that the Consensus had carefully kept hidden from developing civilizations. "The review will be conducted using a multidisciplinary human approach," she continued. "Legal experts, anthropologists, military strategists, humanitarian specialists, a comprehensive team that will examine not just the outcomes, but the entire decision-making process behind your interventions." Senior diplomat Vex attempted to interject. "Our methods have successfully guided numerous civilizations toward optimal development paths." Rodriguez's response was immediate. "Optimal by whose standards? The very definition of optimal requires a comprehensive understanding of cultural complexity that your current approach fundamentally lacks." A holographic displays began to shift, revealing case studies of Consensus interventions. Entire planetary ecosystems altered, cultural systems dismantled, population distributions dramatically modified. Each intervention appeared clinical, efficient, and fundamentally destructive. "We will examine every intervention through multiple lenses," Rodriguez explained. "Historical context, cultural impact, long-term ecological consequences, psychological trauma, economic disruption. No aspect will be overlooked." The challenge was brilliantly constructed. The Consensus faced an impossible choice: refuse the review, and they would implicitly admit to potential wrongdoing. Accept it, and they would expose their most closely guarded historical records to an entirely different system of analysis. Dr. Marcus Chen stepped forward, supporting Rodriguez's challenge with a series of precise legal arguments. International law, interstellar cooperation protocols, emerging frameworks of cosmic diplomacy. Each point was crafted to leave the Consensus with no viable method of refusal. Captain Zara's communication tendrils moved in rapid, complex patterns, a sign of intense internal deliberation. The human delegation had transformed from a group of diplomatic representatives to a strategic team that understood the true nature of power, information, context, and the ability to challenge fundamental assumptions. "The review team will have complete access to our historical records," Rodriguez stated. "No redactions, no limitations." The silence that followed was profound. The alien diplomats exchanged rapid, nearly imperceptible communications. Their translation systems struggled to capture the full complexity of their internal debate. They had encountered many developing civilizations, but never one that so thoroughly challenged their most fundamental operational principles. Vex attempted one final counterargument. "Our interventions prevent widespread suffering. We minimize conflict through systematic management." Rodriguez's response was a masterpiece of strategic communication. "Preventing suffering is not the same as understanding suffering. Your methods eliminate complexity. Ours seek to understand it." The challenge was more than a diplomatic maneuver. It was a fundamental confrontation of philosophical approaches to civilization, development, and collective existence. The Galactic Consensus had arrived expecting to manage a developing civilization. Instead, they found themselves facing a species that viewed conflict, growth, and understanding as a complex, interconnected journey of collective learning. And they were completely unprepared for what would come next. The room hung in a moment of suspended potential, a quantum state of diplomatic uncertainty, where everything could change in an instant. The investigation headquarters occupied a massive complex constructed through international collaboration. Holographic displays covered entire walls, each screen revealing layers of historical interventions that the Galactic Consensus had believed would remain forever hidden. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a diverse team of investigators. Experts from every continent, representing multiple disciplines, worked with a precision that both impressed and unnerved the alien observers. Anthropologists worked alongside military strategists. Ecological experts collaborated with cultural historians. Legal specialists parsed through millennia of intervention records. Each intervention is not just a data point, Rodriguez would often remind her team. It represents entire civilizations, countless individual stories of survival, loss, and potential. The first major revelations came quickly. The consensus's historical records showed a pattern that was both systematic and deeply troubling. What they had described as population management was, in human terms, a series of calculated cultural and biological erasures. Entire planetary ecosystems had been redesigned without consideration for indigenous life forms. Technological interventions had destroyed complex cultural systems that had taken thousands of years to develop. Populations were relocated, redistributed, and sometimes entirely eliminated under the guise of optimal developmental pathways. Dr. Marcus Chen, leading the legal investigation, discovered something even more profound. The consensus had maintained detailed records of each intervention, believing their approach was fundamentally scientific and objective. Instead, the documents revealed a deeply flawed system of cultural assessment that treated developing civilizations as experimental subjects rather than complex, living systems. They didn't just modify populations, Chen explained during a briefing. They systematically removed the core elements that made each civilization unique. The investigation team developed innovative methodological approaches. They didn't just analyze the raw data. They reconstructed the potential developmental trajectories of civilizations that had been managed by the consensus. Computer simulations showed alternative paths of growth that had been violently interrupted. Rodriguez's team introduced a revolutionary concept: restorative assessment. Instead of simply documenting the interventions, they began developing frameworks for potential cultural reconstruction. What would these civilizations have become if left to their natural developmental processes? The alien diplomatic observers watched in growing discomfort. Their advanced technology, which they had believed represented the pinnacle of scientific objectivity, was being challenged by a fundamentally different approach to understanding complexity. Captain Zara, assigned to observe the human investigation, found herself experiencing something her species had no equivalent for: a profound sense of collective moral questioning. The investigation revealed multiple layers of systematic intervention. Some were subtle, carefully managed technological introductions that seemed benign but fundamentally altered societal structures. Others were dramatically violent. Entire planetary populations relocated or eliminated under the guise of conflict prevention. Most shocking were the psychological assessments. The consensus had maintained detailed records of the long-term impacts of their interventions. Generations of psychological trauma, cultural displacement, the systematic elimination of unique evolutionary adaptations. This is not management, Rodriguez would often say. This is cultural genocide. The human team didn't just document these findings. They began developing comprehensive restoration frameworks. How could the damage be assessed? Could some elements of lost cultural complexity be reconstructed? What responsibilities did the consensus bear? Each revelation sent shockwaves through the galactic diplomatic community. Civilizations that had believed themselves to be independently developed discovered they were part of a massive, carefully managed system of cultural manipulation. The investigation was more than a historical review. It was a fundamental challenge to the consensus understanding of civilization, development, and collective existence. As the weeks of investigation continued, something extraordinary began to happen. The very process of comprehensive, multilayered assessment was itself becoming a new model of understanding complex systems. The galactic consensus had arrived expecting to manage a developing civilization. Instead, they found themselves being comprehensively reassessed by a species that understood complexity in ways they had never imagined possible. And nothing would ever be the same again. The final diplomatic session convened in a massive orbital conference center, suspended between Earth and the vast expanse of space. Holographic representations from thousands of civilizations filled the chamber, creating a living mosaic of collective anticipation. Sergeant Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the proceedings, no longer just a military representative, but a symbol of a fundamental shift in galactic consciousness. The investigation had become more than a review. It was a transformative moment that would redefine interstellar relations. Captain Zara, once a representative of the galactic consensus, now sat among the most humble observers. Her species' bioluminescent form had changed, reflecting a profound internal transformation that went beyond simple biological responses. "We are not presenting a conclusion," Rodriguez began, her voice carrying through multiple translation systems. "We are offering a new approach to understanding collective existence." The comprehensive report was unlike any diplomatic document in galactic history. It was not a simple indictment or a list of recommendations. Instead, it was a complex framework for understanding civilization as a living, evolving system. Dynamic, unpredictable, and inherently valuable in its complexity. Dr. Marcus Chen presented the legal implications. The report outlined a new set of interstellar guidelines that recognize the fundamental right of civilizations to develop independently. No longer would technological or biological intervention be considered a standard practice. Instead, observation, understanding, and respectful non-interference would become the new standard. The most revolutionary aspect was not the findings, but the approach itself. Humanity had demonstrated a method of investigation that was fundamentally different from any previous galactic model. It was not about finding fault or assigning blame. It was about understanding, learning, and creating pathways for collective growth. Civilizations that had been managed by the consensus began to share their own stories. Hidden histories emerged, tales of cultural survival, of resistance, of the human capacity to inspire hope in the face of systematic suppression. The alien delegates watched in stunned silence as Rodriguez outlined a new framework of interstellar cooperation. It was not based on technological superiority or military might, but on a profound respect for complexity, individual experience, and collective potential. Advanced civilization is not about control, Rodriguez explained. It is about understanding. It is about recognizing that every unique perspective carries inherent value. The report demonstrated how the consensus's interventions had not just affected individual civilizations, but had fundamentally limited the collective evolutionary potential of the galaxy. By attempting to manage and control, they had actually prevented more complex forms of development. Technological representatives began to see their advanced systems differently. What they had considered efficient management was revealed to be a form of intellectual and cultural stagnation. Humanity offered a different model, one of continuous learning, adaptation, and respect for diverse developmental paths. The psychological impact was profound. Civilizations that had believed themselves to be independently developed now understood their true history. Some felt anger. Others felt a sense of liberation. But all recognized that a fundamental transformation was occurring. Captain Zara spoke for the first time, her voice carrying a vulnerability that was unprecedented in her species' diplomatic history. "We believed we were protecting. We did not understand we were limiting." The final recommendations were not about punishment or complete restructuring. They were about creating new frameworks of understanding. Restoration programs were proposed. Civilizations would be supported in rediscovering their interrupted cultural trajectories. Rodriguez's closing statement became an instant galactic historical document. Civilization is not a destination. It is a journey of continuous discovery. Our greatest strength lies not in our ability to control, but in our capacity to understand. As the session concluded, something extraordinary happened. The rigid hierarchical structures of the galactic consensus began to dissolve. A new model of interaction emerged, one based on mutual respect, comprehensive understanding, and recognition of collective potential. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as a conquering species, but as a catalyst for a fundamental reimagining of interstellar existence. The universe watched and waited, sensing that everything had changed.